Okay, so we're going to be looking at 4 different religions/traditions. We're going to look at their ultimate purpose, which is where they're headed, what they think happens after death, and their way of life. So it's how they live in light of that. We're going to be looking at Hinduism, Judaism, Christianity, and Native American traditions. So let's start with Hinduism. The ultimate purpose for Hinduism is moksha. Moksha is the liberation from samsara. Samsara is the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. So the ultimate purpose for practitioners of Hinduism is to break free of just this rat race, this cycle of reincarnation and karma. It's to break free of that. Now, what happens when you do break free of that varies depending on if you're a monist or a dualist. So for monists, they believe that we are all Brahman. Brahman is the supreme being. That you are Brahman, I'm Brahman, they're Brahman, that we just forgot. And part of moksha is coming to that full realization of being Brahman. And so when we die, we remerge with Brahman. Dualists believe in there being, we're humans, then there's God, 2 separate beings. It's a devotional relationship. So as far as how they live in light of that truth, Gauravani Dasa is a former Hindu monk, and he's still a practitioner of Hinduism. And in the Array of Faith podcast, he describes God as having a social life. He does things, he's exciting, he can be paternal or romantic, playful or fun. And I'm sorry, they also said he/she for God. The Hindu God has a masculine and feminine counterpart that I won't get into because that's complicated. So Hindu practitioners have a very devotional relationship with God. There isn't as much emphasis on evangelism. And so I think it's really important to note how not having a doctrine of eternal punishment versus having one changes things. And I'll get a little more into that in my conclusion after I go over all the religions. Let's move on to Judaism. So Dr. Charles Breton is a Jewish practitioner, and he was also interviewed on the Array of Faith podcast. And he talks about way of life and ultimate purpose as being tikkun olam, which means repairing the world. That is how the Jewish people live, or believe they should live, in light of the ultimate purpose that God is going to bring a new world. As far as understanding where first century Jews got their doctrines of end times and afterlife and this new world from, I consulted this book, Erasing Hell, by Dr. Preston Sprinkle and Francis Chan. So in the Old Testament, there isn't a lot on hell and heaven, but there are vague statements and references to the afterlife. One big one that they kind of built doctrine, a lot of them built doctrine on in the first century, was Daniel 12:2, which says, "Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt." Invitation to World Religion says that Jews have long believed that the soul is immortal and survives death. The fate of the soul in the world to come and God's judgment of that soul remain a subject of speculation and wonder even today. Some, however, regard these beliefs as obsolete and no longer a part of contemporary Jewish faith. But generally, it seems like there's a lot of emphasis on preparing for this new world. Okay, moving on. So Ray Buckley is a practitioner of Christianity as well as Native American traditions. And in his episode of the Array of Faith podcast, he talks about his way of life, and there's a lot of emphasis on reconciliation and helping people, acts of service, caring for the earth. I would say this makes sense in light of both his traditions. Caring for the earth really lines up with Native American traditions because their ultimate purpose varies, but it's cyclical. So they believe that life mimics the seasons. And then in the podcast, he talks about how Jesus was known for humility and acts of service, how he admired that and aspired to live like that. And it was interesting, he said he saw a lot of that in the Native American community. It's just, you need to listen to the episode. And now I'm going to finish with Christianity and kind of give my conclusion. We're talking again about their ultimate purpose and how that impacts their ultimate reality. Invitation to World Religions by Jeffrey Brood describes the ultimate purpose for Christians as union with God. This also poses the possibility of separation from God. And when you bring eternity into the conversation, things get intense. Christianity says that a long time ago, humans chose for themselves. They said, I don't want you anymore, God. I'm going my own way. And we've been going away ever since. In the book of Hosea, which is in the Old Testament, God says to Israel, who were his people representing him at the time, he says, you were like a bride, and when I first rescued you out of captivity in Egypt, you just had these wide eyes and you loved me and you followed me everywhere and I took care of you. And then you left me for these other gods and you just chose your own way and you kept running from me no matter how good things were. And he says, but even though you've run off again, I have a plan. I'm going to bring you back and I'm never going to let anyone take you from me again. And I'm going to make a new covenant bigger than you. It's going to be with all the birds, with all the sky, with everything. And as Christians, and I'm a Christian practitioner, we believe that that's the gospel. Like, that's the gospel. The gospel was the plan. Jesus was the plan. He atoned for our sins so that we can have union with God again. But I think part of, even just with new converts of all backgrounds, there tends to be this emphasis on evangelism is because the stakes are different here. When there's, like, if you're going to lose someone you love, if you believe you're going to lose someone you love to an eternal punishment, that's different than them continuing in the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. There's still a lot to lose there. You still have karma you're taking into your next life. But it's different stakes because eternal punishment is one and done. And again, I know Christianity is a big religion and not everyone has the same doctrine about heaven and hell. But yeah, this is running a little long, but the goal of this project, which is for my world religions class, was just to show how the ultimate purpose for different religions impacts how they live their life. Evangelism, devotional worship, all these things are really impacted by their beliefs about the afterlife. Bye!